There is a man at the far end of the table who has not raised his voice once during the entire evening. You have noticed this without quite knowing why. The conversation has moved around the table the way conversation does at dinners where the guests are interesting and the wine is good. People have held the floor. People have made their points with varying degrees of insistence. Someone near the middle of the table told a story that required a great deal of volume to land correctly, and it did land, and everyone laughed, and the moment passed. And through all of it, the man at the far end has said perhaps 4 things. Each of them was short. Each of them was precise. Each of them, you noticed, changed the direction of the conversation in a way that nobody seemed to consciously register. And yet here you are, an hour later, and the table is discussing exactly the subject he introduced with 11 words somewhere around the second course, and nobody has attributed the direction to him, and he has not sought attribution, and he is sitting back in his chair with the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who have never needed a room to confirm what they already know about themselves. You have just witnessed the art of being unseen. And you have been watching it your entire life without knowing what you were looking at. This is not a quality that announces itself. By definition, it cannot. The moment it becomes visible as a strategy, it ceases to function as one. What it is, at its most essential, is the complete absence of the need for external confirmation. It is the discipline of doing without displaying, of influencing without performing, of existing in a room with full presence and no theater. And it is, in a world that has organized itself almost entirely around the logic of visibility, the rarest and most powerful social skill that exists. The people who have practiced it longest understand something that the visible world has forgotten, or perhaps never learned. That attention and power are not the same currency. That the person holding the most space in the room is not necessarily the person with the most weight in it. That volume is not authority. That presence, real presence, the kind that registers in the nervous systems of the people around you without requiring a performance to produce it, is something that develops through the systematic removal of the very behaviors that most people mistake for confidence. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what it replaced. There was a period, not long ago in historical terms, when display was an obligation rather than a choice. The aristocratic household presented itself to the world through its architecture, its dress, its equipage, its table, its ceremonies of receiving and being received. These were not personal expressions of vanity. They were social responsibilities. The earl who appeared in public in a carriage that did not reflect his station was failing a duty. He was failing to perform the role that his position in the social order required him to perform. Display, in that world, was function. What changed was not human nature. What changed was the social contract around visibility. As the old hierarchies dissolved and new ones formed, the inherited logic of display detached itself from its original function and became something else. It became competition. It became aspiration made visible. It became the primary language through which people communicated their position and their ambitions to a world that no longer had the shared vocabulary to read the older signals. New money learned to speak loudly because loudness was the only language it had access to. The signals of inherited position were either unavailable to it or, worse, available as purchase, which is a different thing entirely. And so the language of display became the default. Became the universal. Became so thoroughly the operating assumption of social life that anyone who declined to participate in it began to look, to the uninitiated eye, like someone who had nothing worth displaying. This is the first and most fundamental misreading. And old money has always known it was a misreading, which is part of why it has never bothered to correct it. The art of being unseen is not the art of being absent. This distinction is worth pausing on, because confusion between the two is where most people go wrong when they attempt to understand it, or worse, to imitate it. Absence is withdrawal. It is the removal of oneself from situations that would require performance, the avoidance of rooms where one's presence might be tested, the cultivation of privacy as a defense against exposure. There are people who mistake this for elegance. Who confuse the minimization of their social footprint with the quality of restraint. They are not practicing the same thing. Full presence without performance is something altogether different. It requires you to be entirely in the room. To listen with real attention. To respond with real consideration. To contribute at the precise moment when contribution is warranted, and to withhold at the precise moment when withholding is the more powerful choice, and to know the difference between those two moments with the accuracy that only comes from long practice. You are not hiding. You are present in the fullest possible sense. You are simply refusing to perform that presence for the benefit of anyone who requires the performance as proof. The people who do this most naturally are often the most difficult to describe afterward. You spent 3 hours at a dinner with someone who does this well, and when a friend asks you the next day how the evening was and who was there, you mention everyone you can remember. And then, a beat later, you remember the person at the far end of the table. And you find, to your slight confusion, that you cannot fully account for why you remember them, because they did not do the things that would ordinarily make someone memorable. They did not tell the best story. They did not arrive or depart dramatically. They did not make a declaration. They did not hold the floor. And yet they are somehow more present in your memory than several people who did all of those things. There is a residue. A texture. Something that stays with you that you cannot fully locate in any specific moment. That residue is what real presence leaves. It is the proof that visibility and impact are not the same force operating in the same direction. And understanding this distinction is, in many ways, the entire syllabus of a particular kind of social education that has been passed down through certain families for a very long time. The discipline has a physical dimension that most people overlook when they think about it in the abstract. The way a person occupies space is one of the most legible things about them, and it is legible to everyone in the room, often below the level of conscious awareness. People who need the room to notice them take up more space than they require. The gestures are wider. The posture reaches outward. The movements between positions are quicker, more frequent, oriented toward being seen in transit. Everything signals a kind of hunger. A need for the room to return, continually, the confirmation that the person exists and matters within it. People practicing the art of being unseen do the opposite. They are still. Not artificially still. Not the studied stillness of someone who has been told that stillness is impressive and is now performing it with visible effort. Naturally still, in the way that someone who is genuinely comfortable in a situation is still. Their stillness is not a posture. It is the physical expression of a nervous system that is not seeking anything from the room. And the room notices this, even when it cannot explain why. Stillness of this quality reads, at the level of instinct, as authority. Because authority, real authority, the kind that does not depend on a room for its validation, has never needed to reach for attention. Attention has always come to it. The voice is another dimension. And this one is perhaps the most immediately observable once you know what to listen for. There is a particular quality to the speech of someone who has mastered this art. The sentences are complete. This sounds simple. It is not. Most speech, especially in social situations where status is implicitly in play, is full of the debris of insecurity. Fillers. Qualifications that are not honest intellectual hedging but social hedging, the verbal equivalent of making yourself smaller so that you can be made smaller on your own terms before anyone else has the chance. Trailing ends. Sentences that lose confidence before they arrive at their own conclusion. The person who does not need the room speaks differently. The sentence begins and it ends. The thought is complete before it is offered. There is no apology in the cadence. There is no upward inflection at the close that turns a statement into a question seeking permission to be a statement. The words land. And then there is silence. And the silence is not uncomfortable because the person who produced it is not uncomfortable with it. Silence, for someone who has nothing to prove, is simply the pause between thoughts. It is not a threat. It is not. It is not an absence to be filled. It is part of the rhythm of a conversation conducted by people who are genuinely interested in what they are saying and in what is being said to them, rather than in managing the impression being formed about them at every moment. The listening deserves its own attention. Because the art of being unseen is as much about how you receive as how you produce, and most people, when they are in rooms where they feel their position is being evaluated, are not listening at all. They are waiting. waiting for the pause in which they can speak, for the opening in which they can contribute, for the moment when the room will give them the attention they came to collect. The performance of listening is one of the most common and least convincing social performances. You can see it clearly once you have been shown what to look for. The slight vacancy behind the eyes that indicates the mind is rehearsing rather than receiving. The nods that come too regularly, like a metronome set to agreeable. The response that does not quite connect to what was actually said, only to what was expected to be said. Real listening is rarer and more recognizable than people think. It has a quality of absorption, of genuine engagement with the specific, particular thing being said rather than with the general category it belongs to. When someone who truly listens responds, their response has texture. It is connected to something real in what you said, not to the version of it they were expecting. And you feel it. You feel the difference between being heard and being waited out, and the feeling of being genuinely heard by someone who is clearly very capable of not paying attention, who is choosing to pay attention to you specifically, is one of the most powerful social experiences available. This is why the art of being unseen is, at its deepest level, a form of generosity. It directs the energy that lesser practitioners spend on managing their own image entirely outward. Toward the room. Toward the conversation. Toward the people in it. And the people in it feel this, even when they cannot name it. There is a generation of thinking that has conflated self-promotion with self-worth, and this has produced a set of behaviors that once seemed native to a specific ambition and now seem universal. The personal brand. The cultivated profile. The carefully composed public identity assembled from selected moments, selected associations, selected opinions expressed with selected emphasis at selected intervals for the benefit of a selected audience. These are not new impulses. The desire to control how one is perceived is as old as perception itself. What is new is the infrastructure that makes permanent, scalable performance not only possible but expected. The platform that rewards frequency. The algorithm that privileges volume. The culture that has learned to mistake the performance of a life for the life itself. Within this context, the art of being unseen is not just a social preference. It is a philosophical position. It is the refusal of a particular transaction. The transaction that says, I will show you who I am, in managed form, and you will respond with recognition, and that recognition will constitute my value. The people who have practiced invisibility as a discipline have always understood that this transaction is a trap. Not because recognition is worthless, but because the version of yourself that exists for the purpose of being recognized is necessarily an edited version. A curated one. A version calibrated to produce the response you want, which means a version that has already been shaped by what you think other people want to see, which means a version that is less yours with every iteration. The self that is never performed is the self that remains intact. And the people who have kept it intact over a long period of time have a quality that is immediately recognizable to anyone paying attention, though it is almost never recognizable as the specific thing it is. It is recognized as solidity, as groundedness, as the sense that here is a person who knows who they are and has known for long enough that the question no longer requires active management. They are not performing their identity at you. They are simply being it, in your presence, in the same way they would be it if you were not present at all. That quality is magnetic in direct proportion to its rarity. The social applications of this understanding are extensive, but they are not algorithmic. You cannot deploy them as tactics. The moment you are deploying visibility restraint as a tactic, you have already missed the point, because tactics are performances of their own kind, and the art requires the genuine absence of the performing self. What you can do is practice the underlying conditions that make the art possible. The conditions are not complicated. They are simply demanding. The first is genuine sufficiency. The art of being unseen is only available to someone who genuinely does not need the room's response to feel adequate. This is not a posture to adopt. It is a condition to arrive at, through whatever means available. Through an honest accounting of what you are and what you have built and what it amounts to. Through the accumulated experience of rooms that valued you before you performed for them and rooms that performed for you without valuing you at all, and the long, slow understanding that the former is what matters and the latter is noise. When you are genuinely sufficient, when your sense of your own worth is not a daily project requiring external maintenance, the art becomes natural rather than effortful. You stop performing because you no longer need to. The second condition is patience. The visible world moves quickly, and it rewards speed. The unseen world moves slowly, and it rewards depth. A reputation built through consistent, unperformed quality accumulates over a much longer timeline than a reputation built through strategic visibility. There will be periods, sometimes extended ones, in which the person doing less is noticed less, and the person performing more collects more of the room's immediate currency. This is uncomfortable, and it is real, and it is the specific test that separates the practitioners from the aspirants. Because the practitioners understand, from the inside, that immediate currency and durable capital are not the same asset class. They have seen, over time, what happens to the profile that was maintained through performance when the performance stops. They have also seen what happens to the reputation built through doing. It does not require maintenance. It compounds. The third condition is precision. Being unseen is not the same as being vague. Quite the reverse. The people who practice this most effectively are, when they speak, exceptionally clear. Their contributions are exact. Their opinions are formed and real. Their humor, when they produce it, lands with accuracy rather than effort. They are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are quiet because they have learned the value of the thing they have to say, and they do not dilute it through overuse. A word that is spoken rarely has more weight than a word spoken constantly. A person who speaks rarely has more weight than a person who speaks constantly. Not because silence is inherently powerful, but because the rarity of the contribution makes its content matter more. When someone who has been quiet all evening finally speaks, every person in the room turns toward the sound. The fourth condition, and perhaps the most difficult, is the willingness to let others receive the credit for things you have influenced. This is where the art becomes genuinely demanding. Because the credit reflex is deep. It is wired in at a level that precedes social reasoning. The impulse to be seen as the origin of a good outcome, the impulse to have the work traced back to you, to have your name attached to the thing that worked, this is not vanity in any shallow sense. It is the entirely reasonable desire for the world to accurately reflect your contribution. And relinquishing it, not because you are forced to, but because you understand that influence exercised without credit is a more durable form of influence than influence that requires constant attribution, is one of the most counterintuitive disciplines available. The person who lets someone else carry the outcome, who provides the idea in a form that allows the other person to believe they arrived at it themselves, who steers without appearing to steer, who advances the thing that matters without requiring that the thing be publicly associated with them, that person is operating at a level of social understanding that most people never reach. Not because it is intellectually complex. Because it requires the complete overriding of the credit reflex, and the credit reflex is one of the most insistent forces in the human social system. The people who have mastered this are the people who accomplish the most over the longest period of time. Because they are not slowed by the friction that accompanies visible ambition. They are not managing opposition or navigating the resentment of people who feel outshone. They are simply doing the thing that matters, without the performance that would make the doing visible, and the results accumulate cleanly. There is a particular quality of room in which this art becomes most visible to the educated observer. Not the large room. Not the public event. Not the setting designed for networking and display where the operating assumption is that everyone present is there to be seen and to see. The art is most legible in the smaller room. The dinner of 8. The meeting where the real decisions get made rather than announced. The conversation that happens at the margin of the larger event, between two people who have quietly found each other in the way that people with the same understanding always find each other, drawn not by performance but by its absence. In these rooms, the social grammar is different. The people who fill large rooms with presence often become unexpectedly quiet here. Because the skills that work in the large room, volume, charisma, the ability to hold attention, do not transfer cleanly into the small one. The small room requires something more specific. It requires the ability to think while others are thinking. To contribute to a shared understanding rather than to make a personal impression. To be genuinely interested in the problem at hand rather than in the effect you are producing while engaging with it. These rooms select for the art in a way that large rooms do not. And the people who move between the large room and the small one with equal ease are the people who understand both languages, who can turn the visibility up when the occasion requires and turn it entirely off when the occasion is better served by its absence. This flexibility is rarer than either ability in isolation, and it is the full expression of what the art makes possible. You do not arrive at it through technique. You arrive at it through the long process of understanding what you are actually trying to do in any given room. Most people, if they are honest, are trying to be well regarded. They are managing the impression they create. They are running, at some level of consciousness, the continuous calculation of how they are being received and adjusting their behavior in response to that calculation. This is exhausting, and it is, more importantly, the thing that makes genuine presence impossible. Because genuine presence requires that your attention be fully outward, fully absorbed in what is actually happening, and the impression management calculation is a form of attention directed entirely inward. The art of being unseen begins the moment you stop running the calculation. The moment you decide, not as a tactic but as a genuine shift in orientation, that the room's response to you is not your primary business in the room. That your primary business is whatever the room has gathered to address, and that you will serve that business to the best of your ability without requiring the service to be attributed to you, without performing the serving for the benefit of anyone watching, without calibrating the level of your contribution to the level of recognition you anticipate receiving. When you do this, something changes. Not immediately and not dramatically. Gradually. The energy that was previously allocated to the management of perception becomes available for other uses. It becomes available for actual thinking, for actual listening, for actual contribution. And the quality of what you produce changes in proportion to the quality of attention you were previously diverting. The people who have been watching you in the room, who have been reading the room the way people who know how to read rooms read them, will notice. Not all of them. Not the ones running their own calculations too loudly to observe anything outside themselves. But the ones who have been around long enough to know the difference between performance and quality will notice, and they will remember, and the next time there is a small room with a real problem in it, they will think of you. This is how the art compounds. Not through the accumulation of impressions. Through the accumulation of outcomes. And outcomes, unlike impressions, do not require maintenance. They exist in the world independent of your continued presence and effort to sustain them. They are real. And reality, in the long run, is the only currency that does not devalue. The man at the far end of the table has said perhaps for things all evening. You will remember him long after you have forgotten the person who held the floor the longest. You will not be entirely sure why, and you will not fully be able to explain it to anyone you tell about the dinner. You will say that there was something about him. That he was very still. That when he spoke it mattered. That you had the sense, without any specific evidence to point to, that he understood more about the room than anyone else in it, including what you were thinking, including what you had not said. You will be right about all of it. And if you are paying the right kind of attention, you will understand, on the drive home, that what you witnessed was not a personality. It was a practice. A long, disciplined, deeply unglamorous practice that produces no visible proof of itself and requires no audience for its continuation. A practice so thoroughly in opposition to the logic of the world you move through daily that most people never discover it exists. It exists. It has always existed. In the rooms that matter most, it has always been the room's most reliable resident. You can learn it. Not quickly. Not through technique. Through the slow, patient, daily decision to require less from the world than the world keeps offering to give you. Through the gradual discovery that the less you perform, the more you become. Through the long, quiet accumulation of a self that does not need the room to recognize it, because it already knows what it is, and has known for long enough that the knowledge is no longer an effort. The man at the far end of the table already knows. One day, if you practice long enough, so will you.